Okay, well, hello again. This is a demonstration I've been meaning to do for some time. I was going to get one of those $30 field detectors, you know, the magnetic field detectors that the UFO and the 5G people use. A professional piece of equipment, of course, to make the demonstration more understandable for those more dim-witted among the UFO and 5G community. However, I haven't really had the time or the inclination, and what with the COVID and the postage and all that sort of stuff, I thought I'd do something that would, I think, suffice. Now, if you disagree, let me know in the comments below. Now, I've got a cheap and cheerful Chinese handheld radio here, and I'm going to use it to generate a radio signal, and we'll see that radio signal appear on this meter. It's an analog meter. It's basically an analog equivalent of the sort of thing Gary Jones waves around. It's just a field detector and a field strength indicator. Now, this one's a relative field strength indicator. It won't give you a strength in dBm or anything like that, because this is basically just a meter and a diode and a capacitor. It's a relative field strength indicator. So, so if I press the transmit button on the cheap Chinese radio, as you can see, this thing doesn't have batteries or amplifier in it. It's just basically a meter. So you can see that the meter is indicating a relative signal strength, okay, as I hold that cheap Chinese radio and transmit a signal with it. I'm just moving the radio around here. But you can see that it's indicating a relative field strength. So that's exactly the sort of thing Gary Jones is looking at, but in a digital form, on his wide as a barn door signal analyzer, and saying, oh, look at that. That's a microwave level, that is. Microwave level. You go into the woods, you're getting microwaved. And of course, he has absolutely no idea what frequency he's looking at. He's looking at a field strength, just as we're looking at a field strength here. I mean, can you tell what frequency this is by looking at this field strength? I can make it, there you go. Oh, definitely a microwave level there. The whole thing is ridiculous. And oh, incidentally, just before I move on, I thought it was funny that the this is a little Baofeng Chinese $30 radio, and I was looking at the Trump supporters. You know, they're all out there in their paramilitary gear, "Make America Great Again," and they've all got the little Baofeng UV5R Chinese radios clipped onto their their bulletproof vests. Yeah. So they're not using American gear. There's no Motorola there. They're buying the cheap Chinese radios, and they're the $30 Chinese radios, and they're screaming, "Make America Great Again, yay!" Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. Right, so let's just get back to before the battery dies in this thing. There we go. So you can see there you go, there's a signal coming from the radio that's being measured on the meter. Now, in order to see what frequency this energy is, because remember, we can't, by looking at that, well, we can see a relative field strength. We can see a field strength there. But we have absolutely no idea what frequency that energy is on. And to get an idea what frequency that energy is on, we need something like this. Now, this is not a $30 toy. This is a Hewlett-Packard spectrum analyzer. It's 100 kilohertz to 22 gigahertz spectrum analyzer. Okay. So let's just have a look at the spectrum analyzer. When I press the PTT on the radio, you can see the signals come up on the spectrum analyzer. If you want to find out what the frequency is of the energy that we were just looking at. Let's go back to the meter. There we go. So we want to see what the actual frequency is of that energy. We have to look at the spectrum analyzer. And I'll just show you. You can just see the. Oops. Spectrum analyzer, of course, is a lot more sensitive than just this analog meter with a diode on it. But can I just zoom out a bit there? Zoom out a bit there. Okay. So you can press the button would help. There we are. So you can see as the meter goes up, so the spikes appear on the spectrum analyzer. Yep. And the signal disappears and the spikes disappear. Signal appears, spikes appear. So you can see that that's what we're looking at there. Okay, so let's have a look at the spectrum analyzer. Now this is not a $35 toy. These things cost many thousands of dollars. It's a professional piece of equipment. Okay, so let's just have a look at see if I can get myself in a position here to show you what I mean. So we'll transmit the signals. Now this cheap Chinese radio is really a piece of garbage. It's not approved for use in Australia commercially, and the reason for that is that you can see those harmonics. So you've got a fundamental signal there. Oh, the battery's gone flat in the bloody radio now. Okay, so you've got a fundamental signal, which is this big spike here, and then you've got harmonics from that. Now, if this was commercially acceptable for use commercially in Australia, these spikes wouldn't be here. Well, they may be here, but they'd be right down here. They wouldn't be way up here. And that's because this Chinese radio is a cheap piece of rubbish. Okay, so I don't know if you can actually see that, but what that is doing, okay, so see the marker there, 145. There, it's saying 145.0 megahertz. Okay, and that's the fundamental signal from this radio. So it's nowhere near microwave. Nowhere near. Remember, microwave starts at 1,000 megahertz. Okay, so let's just move the marker along to the next one. This is a harmonic being generated by the same radio. It's hard to do this on your knees when... Okay, that's close enough. And now if we zoom in, you can see the marker is now at 288 megahertz. 288 megahertz. Okay. And that's the second signal here coming from this little handheld radio. So that's 288 megahertz and 145 megahertz. Neither of them are microwave frequencies. Remember, that's what we were looking at on the analog meter. You can't look at a signal strength and determine what frequency it is. You need a spectrum analyzer to be able to do that. So let's have a look at the third one. Where is that? So they're actually getting smaller, these harmonics, the further we get away from the fundamental, but not by much, because it's a very poor quality radio. Cheap, cheerful Chinese rubbish used by paramilitary organisations all over the world. And now this is saying 430 megahertz. Okay, that's the third harmonic from it. 430 megahertz. And you can see that. We're looking at the indication on the left-hand side there. Okay, 430 megahertz. It's saying there. Okay, so you can see this harmonic-rich piece of crap. This particular radio is generating VHF fundamental and UHF harmonics. But there is no way you can look at a meter like this, be it analog or digital. Look at a signal strength and say, oh yeah, it's a microwave level, that is. I mean, how could you get 145 megahertz, 430 megahertz, what was the other one, 288 megahertz? From looking at that. You just can't, can you? So, so you've got to be very, very careful with these UFO investigators, because most of them are UFO enthusiasts. And the UFO enthusiast is not going to investigate properly. They're going to make ridiculous claims like, oh, that's a microwave level, that is, when they actually have absolutely no idea what the frequency of the energy is that they're looking at. The energy that's indicated on the digital display on their little field meters, field strength meters. They would have absolutely no idea whether it's one frequency, two frequencies, three frequencies, as I've just demonstrated there. It could be 30 frequencies. They've got no idea what they're looking at. All right, well, I just thought I'd bang that out whilst I had access to the spectrum analyzer, because these things are extremely expensive and it's not the sort of thing I could afford to buy. These are tens of thousands of dollars. Hewlett-Packard 100 kilohertz, I think it is, to 22 gigahertz spectrum analyzer. As always, I hope you found that interesting or informative, or both. If you struggled through the video all the way to this point, many thanks. And thanks for watching, and maybe I'll catch you again.